When people look back at this decade, I think there's a very decent chance that this moment could be seen as a turning point. Until now, the Trump administration has stayed well away from interfering with the AI industry, but today Anthropic's Mythos 5 and Fable 5 have effectively been banned from being used by anyone. I'm filming this on a Saturday night. I could be watching Qatar versus Switzerland in the World Cup right now, but this is a monumentous occasion and I wanted to get this video out as quickly as possible because this really could change the course of history. Most of the press seems to be mostly covering this story as an attempt by America to stay ahead of its adversaries and of its allies in Europe, but I think that's missing some key context about this situation. Over the last couple of months, you may be well aware of this, Anthropic have got themselves into some muddy waters with the US government, to say the least. This started early this year when their models were used in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and in military operations in Iran. And many employees at Anthropic have been quite uneasy about their models being used for military purposes, especially after their model was allegedly used in an airstrike that killed 120 children in Iran. So when the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth demanded that Anthropic give the government unrestricted access to all of their models for any purpose that they deem suitable, Anthropic refused. Hegseth was outraged and actually designated the company a supply chain risk, which was an unprecedented development. That then started a legal battle between Anthropic and the US government. The Trump administration then went after what they deemed to be Anthropic's woke radical left views, and they set their sights on banning all federal agencies from using any of the company's products. Despite all this, like all the other frontier AI companies, Anthropic continued in their reckless pursuit of building super intelligent AI, and they made a very scary breakthrough with Claude Mythos, which I'm sure is a model that you've heard of by now. Claude Mythos is a general reasoning model that was able to find new software vulnerabilities in almost every operating system and browser on the planet, and that included vulnerabilities that had gone unnoticed by humans for over 20 years. So they chose to not release the model to the public and only share it with a handful of companies and later the US government so that they had time to patch the exploits that Claude Mythos was able to identify. If they didn't do that and they just released this model for everyone to use, we could have seen a real cybersecurity catastrophe. Seeing these capabilities seemed to change something within the Trump administration, which had previously been very blasé about accelerating AI. They had pretty much denied the extreme risks that it posed, and they were staunchly against any attempts to regulate the technology. But then, surprisingly, we saw people like Ted Cruz begin to acknowledge the catastrophic risks of AI, and the US government even held talks with China around putting guardrails on the technology, which could be the stepping stone to the international treaty that we so urgently need. This is best exemplified if we look at the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who began to emphasize the role the government must play to ensure these models are safe. Importantly, Bessent was able to escape the idiotic short-term thinking that led the Trump administration to treat AI like a normal run-of-the-mill technology. He was able to recognize that Claude Mythos represented a genuine step function gain in our capabilities, and that we will continue to see more step function gains as the exponential progress in our capabilities continues. To put it simply, if governments aren't capable of understanding the trajectory that we're on, they're simply not going to be in a position to prevent loss of control and extinction. So that's why I was very happy to see this language come from top American officials. And all this talk did actually result in action. It culminated in Trump signing an executive order to give the government the power to stop an AI model being released if it's deemed to be too dangerous. Now, at least initially, this will work as a voluntary agreement between the government and AI companies, but this is way further than the previous Biden administration was willing to go, and it's way further than most people expected this Trump administration to go, which just goes to show how obviously terrifying the rate of AI progress we're seeing is, and how quickly the Overton window can move when it comes to AI regulation. We've even seen this week that both Anthropic and OpenAI have come out to support some kind of international organization that would be able to slow down or even pause AI development to stop it from escaping our control and killing us all. But of course, they're both still pursuing recursive self-improvement because they simply are not going to stop unless governments force them to. This has all been leading up to what's happened this week with the Claude Mythos ban. So as Anthropic were gearing up to release a safeguarded version of Claude Mythos called Fable 5 to the public, which at least in theory would not have the dangerous cyber capabilities that Claude Mythos does, the US government reportedly asked them to pause this release because they simply didn't think it was safe for the public to have their hands on it yet. So when Anthropic ignored them and went ahead with model release anyway, it seems like the government were just sitting around waiting for any excuse to ban the model. Then, just a couple days after release, there were reports of a jailbreak which scared the administration because they thought it would allow anybody on the planet to have access to expert level cyber capabilities. Now, Anthropic say that these jailbreaks were actually fairly minor and the vulnerabilities they discovered were already known, but regardless of how serious these jailbreaks were, the government had found its reason to ban Claude Mythos. So last night, they sent a letter to Anthropic demanding that they ban access to Claude Mythos for any foreign national, and that includes foreign nationals that work at Anthropic and live in the United States. I'm sure the government were well aware of what this would lead to before they did it, but Anthropic then realized that the only way they could realistically comply with this directive was to suspend use of Mythos for everyone, whether they're American or not. So rather than export controls being the government's main goal, it seems like they were using it as a tool to achieve what they really wanted all along, which was just to stop the model from being released, full stop. So what does this all mean for the future? Well, one thing is clear. We now have a precedent that the government has a right to step in and protect people when for-profit companies race to build and release models that could pose serious harm to critical infrastructure and to human life. Now, to be fair, the way the Trump administration went about this was quite sloppy. AI companies are now in a position where they don't really know what the government's requirements are for a model to be released because this government seems to have just done it on a whim. So having some kind of expert-led government body like the existing Centre for AI Standards and Innovation set clear rules around what the red lines are when it comes to AI development would be a smarter way to do this. But as someone who's sitting across the pond who is very worried about what unfettered AI acceleration might mean for me, for my family, and for the survival of humanity, I'm just very happy that governments have finally realized that they are still in charge and that they can tell the AI companies who are choosing to gamble with our lives to do one.